everyone, welcome back. Yep, we're going to do a facade today, but it's not going to be a nice and cheery facade. We're going into the world of Warhammer, where it's dark and gloomy and maybe even scary and dangerous. How's that for setting the stage? But we are going to do a facade today. It is going to be Warhammer themed. We're going to put something together we're just going to create ourselves. Here's a little taste of what it's going to look like at the very end. As always, we have a lot to do in this episode, so buckle up, sit down, grab yourself a drink, let's get going. Now, while this is going to be a built facade, it's not necessarily a scratch-built facade. I'm going to rely heavily on bits and pieces from within this box, just kind of finding some interesting shapes and putting them together in something that's, I don't know, we'll kind of figure it out as we go along. It'll be quite a bit of test fitting, but let's get started here. So, starting out with some paint. Just going to be using Gen 3 products pretty much for all the undercoating, all the color layers on this project as well. Base coat of black overall, and I did this for all the different pieces because I want to kind of add to that drama, these deeper shadows and such. So just everything gets a coat of black paint, and then we'll start doing some highlighting, some post shading, if you will, using various colors here, just to start bringing out those shapes and volumes. My end goal for this piece is to have something that's gritty, kind of animated. It's got those deep shadows, those sort of brighter colors. It's the underworld. It's got that Warhammer feel, almost animated, cartoon, comic style sort of thing. So I'm going to try to bring that out a little bit through the painting. So lots of bolder colors, adding some heavy chipping here, just using the sponge method, just kind of overall, just really laying a foundation of some really good colors, some shading and textures. Now, as we start moving into the colors here, there'll be some adjustments along the way as I kind of start putting things together and seeing how things work with each other. But you'll notice the painting, especially on these early stages here, what I'm doing is basically glazing over the top of those pre-shade colors and the scratches and chips and all those different textures we already laid down here. And that's just a great way to build up the colors slowly, and you have a lot of control. And it also, that transparency allows, as I mentioned, all those deeper shadows, those scratches, those textures that we laid earlier on to show through. And we can build on those later on as we go as well. So it's a great technique. I enjoy using that kind of thing. And then as you can see here, we can come in with some finer brush works and start bringing out specific chips and scratches here and there. And so it starts to build up those various layers as I start moving through the process. And of course, there are the fine brush strokes as well to bring out individual items. And then actually it makes a very nice contrast between when you start using those washes or those filters on certain areas, and then you come back in and add more opaque or carefully planned out brush strokes and bring out different highlights and whatever on the front sides of these. So now everything starts having some depth, some focal points, some visual interest here, something to really draw your eye to. And yes, it was a back and forth process, so I'll add some extra chips, again, coming back in with the sponge, adding some extra glazing here and there just to bring out certain elements. Just really just building it up kind of piece by piece here. A lot of experimenting. Sometimes I'll go back and recolor certain areas. You'll see that along the way too. You'll see some painting of one color, and then next shot you might see, like for instance, this little fan here, I'm bringing it out as kind of a blue-green color here. A little bit later you'll see that it's actually more of a bronze color because I overpainted it. But even overpainting it like that, I can still use these base layers, so these highlights that I'm adding now and even that base color to give it some extra little pizzazz. Well, just that fast as we start moving on to this next scene here, you'll see that those little fan blades have already miraculously and magically switched colors to more of a bronze tone, as I mentioned. Changing colors along the way, just experimenting and having a good time. Now I'm going to move on to some enamel washes here, and there's a whole variety of war game washes. That's what the name of is on the bottle. A whole variety of colors here, and that clear bottle is the dedicated thinner. And oftentimes what I'll do is add a couple of drops of the thinner into the crevices, and then the filter or the wash here, and just let it, zip along through capillary action. A lot of this is just profiling these individual pieces, adding that little extra bit of depth and shadowing and shading there. But I'll also use those washes to do a proper wash in certain areas to kind of enrich those colors. As mentioned earlier, I painted up a number of different types of pieces for this. Some I used, some I actually did not use. All the while not still quite having an idea of where and how this is all going to lay out. Getting close to doing that now, so I'm just going to finish up a couple of these pieces here, and then we're going to move on to the base and start laying this out. A special thank you to all my amazing Patreon members for your incredible support. Your contributions help me continue to create content for this channel. If you're not already a member, I invite you to join our Patreon community. As a member, you'll gain access to exclusive behind-the-scenes content, early releases, and more. I hope you'll consider joining Patreon and supporting this channel. Thank you very much. So when I decided to start laying out the facade here, I knew that I wanted basically a wall, facade wall, makes sense. And I wanted it about the same size as the Charvin's facade that I just finished before. So this one ends up being a little bit bigger. It's about 5.5 inches by 7 inches. What's important here, this is why I want to show this little scene right now, is this is the tip of a paintbrush. So once the paintbrushes get old and you're ready to throw them away, pop off that tip. And then with some pliers or tools, you can just bend those into any sort of shape you want. In this case, I've got roughly a square shape. And I'm going to use that as basically a stamp or a punching tool in order to make my brick pattern on my facade. Now, as you can see, I decided to change the type of foam I'm going to use. So instead of the kind of balsa foam, soft density foam, I went with something a little bit firmer here. And now it's just time to start playing around with this and seeing kind of what looks good here. Now this is basically a trial and error thing for me. So some of these pieces have already been painted up that I don't use. Some pieces have not been painted yet that I decide I will use. It's all by eye. And even when I get a little bit further here, you'll see that it changes between what I kind of have conceptually now versus what it ends up looking like at the very end. But that's okay. It's all part of the game. Just like I said, it's all trial and error, doing a lot of stuff just by eye here. I do get far enough along with the basic concept that I now feel comfortable I can go ahead and start working on the back wall here. And so for that, I'm just going to carve into this foam, creating different types of stones and bricks and things like that. The overall appearance of this is going to be kind of a gritty, grimy warehouse scene. I'm going to title it World Under, so underworld sort of a vibe to it, so kind of closed in and dark and whatever. And as you can see here, I'm using my little punch tool. This is that little piece of paintbrush and just kind of stamping out all those little brick patterns there. Really handy tool. It makes very quick work of all this. And of course the price is right as well. And once I have all these bricks and rocks and stones in the wall kind of in place, then I want to put some mortar between those bricks. And so for that, I'll just be using wall spackling paste, and I'll have some water over the side here, and I'll kind of thin that out here in just a second. And just a nice thin layer of the spackling paste, kind of work it down in between those bricks to add that appearance of mortar and plaster. And then finally, the last step before I start painting, the spackling paste itself is very porous. It just takes up paint like crazy. So I'm just going to seal everything up here real quick. This is just a quick layer of Mod Podge. Actually, it's thinned down as well with water. Just apply that overall, let that dry, and now I have a surface that will take paint nicely without just totally soaking in and taking forever to actually paint. And speaking of the painting, well, here we go. I'm going to select a few colors here. And actually the colors here that I'm going to use are on the lighter side, so a little bit brighter. So the contrast between those kind of green, gray pieces and this little bit lighter wall, I think that's going to look kind of nice. And it'll also allow me to do some weathering on it that will actually show up. No reason to be very careful here at this stage. We're just painting a factory wall here. So I'll just add the paint directly onto the surface here. Just a variety of colors, nice and loose, and start working those into the surface. Coming together pretty good by now. Added a little bit of a decorative stripe here along the bottom just to give it a little bit of interest. It's masked off a little black layer right there. And there we have, that's our wall, all ready to start applying all those little features that we've been painting out along the way as well. Okay, speaking of painting features, I couldn't help myself. I had to somehow figure out how to make this look kind of a Warhammer-y kind of a theme here, just to kind of reinforce that. And so I went ahead and I made a bunch of little Xerox copies of this Warhammer skull guy here. Someone who knows Warhammer better than me will be able to tell you probably exactly what tribe or what clan this is from. But anyway, just cut that out of some basic plain paper. I'm just using the sponge method here rather than say the airbrush, because really the masking is not that careful here. So if I can apply this, just kind of dab it straight up and down, hopefully I get some nice edges on this, and I can have this little logo here kind of lurking in the background behind all this equipment. Okay, I'm actually kind of surprised. This worked out better. The stencil worked out better than I thought it would, so that was nice. Before I get ready to do the next stage, I just want to add a few extra details to this back wall, just to make a few things pop out a little bit more, just define some of these individual bricks and rocks, add a little bit of discoloration. I'm using the weathering pencils here because it's super easy. They're very quick, very little cleanup. Generally, I'll moisten the surface of the facade itself just to get a little bit damp, and then I'll use the pencil just to put a little line or some coloring in an area, and then I'll use another brush that's just moistened with water to do a little bit of blending or editing. Super easy process, and it worked perfect for this. Here we go. Now it's time to put everything together. All these little pieces that I've been painting up and setting to the side here while I'm working on the facade and such. Well, now it's time to place them on the base itself, or the facade wall itself. I've done quite a bit of test fitting at this point. I wouldn't say quite a bit. There's still some things that I'm foggy about here, but I think everything is going to work out. I'm just using white glue. That will be my adhesive. That's plenty of sticking power to hold these in place. There's really no weight, no stress on these at all. It's just a matter of trying to lay these out, get them aligned. And like I said, a few little edits along the way here, but I have a pretty good concept of where this is going until the very, very end. A little bit of scratch building, or a little bit of scratch built items. This is just round tube, and I've just bent them into shape for the odd, piping and stuff that will just run along these walls here. Along with this piping, I've got this really nice little fuse box set from RT Diorama. I'm going to grab one of those off of these. These are printed parts. I'm going to have to snip one of those off, clean it up a little bit, and that will be added to the back wall as well. And then and I'll paint it out, of course. And then we're really starting to get close to the end here. Everything will start to come together for that final layout. Just a few extra final details, just kind of finishing some things up here, adding these little clamps around this plumbing and such. I'll add a little bit of wiring to that fuse box. You'll see that in the final photographs. Last thing I did on this was I put a small frame around that. You'll see that coming up here in just a few minutes. I really enjoy these facades. I could do these all day, every day. And I've had this one completed for about a week now. It's hanging on my wall. I look at it all the time. It's a real eye catcher. You know, it's really nice actually just to have a piece of your work that's actually integrated in maybe your living spaces like mine is, and just hanging on the wall as a decorative piece. If you enjoy this channel, please hit that like and subscribe if you'd like to see a little bit more content. Some things that are a little more exclusive. I do have a Patreon page. I'd love to see you over there. Here's a few photographs of the facade and the facade within a frame, and then just a few kind of fancier shots here at the end with a little bit of Photoshop background. Until the next time, guys, take care, and of course, happy modeling.